Well, great, great question. Let me see. Okay, the first one. Okay, the young man who was here last night, who asked me why I didn't stay longer last night. Um, well, I mean, I don't want to be defensive, but I can tell you that I try. I may not be successful all the time, but I consciously try to engage with young people on an ongoing basis. Not just or primarily after a talk like this, but in the context of the work that I do. Well, first of all, I'm a teacher, so. But there's some hierarchical structures there. So I actually I work with abolitionist organizations both in the U.S. and in other parts of the world where the vast majority of the activists are young people. And I totally agree that older people, elders, and I guess I've reached that age. So I have to identify into that category. Have a responsibility to learn from young people. As young people, have a responsibility to learn from older people. So I don't know where you are. Okay. And I'm sorry we didn't have time. Yesterday, you saw all of the people that were crowding around who wanted to have a conversation. It was impossible. It would have been impossible to have the kind of conversation you wanted to have at that time. But maybe we can find another time, a better time. So thank you for allowing us all to understand the importance of intergenerational activism. That is the only thing that is going to lead us in a progressive direction today. Okay, the question about race and gender. Yeah, where are you? Where? Oh, all the way back there. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. First, we know that the notion of race is it doesn't express what we have always wanted it to express. A thought, it just doesn't. It can't. It's too simple. And it is too laden with too much history and too much racism. So race itself is in many ways a racist concept. But it has done an enormous amount of damage in the world. And so we can't just say, oh, we're going to ignore it. We're going to pretend the notion doesn't exist. This is what the purveyors of the notion of colorblindness want you to do. Right? This is what the law tries to do. And I would suggest there's a wonderful video that Stuart Hall, who unfortunately just passed 2 weeks ago, I think, and it's called Race, the Floating Signifier. And one of the points that he makes in that video is that race is like a language. And that in many ways, it's how we orient ourselves. And especially in a country like this, we're obsessed with race. We're totally obsessed. We always want to know what the racial background of this person is. And especially if someone looks racially ambiguous, you're not satisfied until you know. You know? So we can't pretend that it doesn't make a difference. We can't pretend that we can ignore it. But it's important to engage with it critically. And so when people say, oh, now we have a black president, that must mean that we're living in a post-racial society, because after all, that was the last major racial barrier to be conquered in this country. Yeah, right. So I think the point is to make it more complicated and to develop the kind of popular discourse that allows us to grasp the complexity. And the same thing I would say about gender. Yeah, I can tell you that when we first started doing work around women's issues, the term gender wasn't even used. It had no currency at that time. And then we began to recognize how important gender was. But of course, gender was conceptualized in a very narrow way. Gender was about, well, if you raised the term gender and everybody thought about women, right? It was a way of bringing women into the frame. And then people said, well, oh, men are gendered as masculine. So we have to talk about masculinities as well. And I can tell you that I just ran into speaking out in Duluth, Minnesota. No, it wasn't Duluth. It was in Illinois, University of Southern Illinois, where where like the population of black students on that campus is 20%, which means that there are more black students there than there are at most HBCUs. And so I talked to a group of young men who were in an organization that was, what do they call it? Progressive masculinities? Something like that, progressive masculinities. And so these were young black men who were involved in the campaign against violence against women, who worked with the Women's Center, who did rape crises work. And I told them, I said, you know, I remember many years ago, there was a group of black men in Washington, D.C., back in the 1980s, who started a group like that. And I thought at that time that would take off, and that men all over the country would get involved in these feminist efforts. And it didn't happen. But it's happening in the University of Southern Illinois. So those of you who want to do something on this campus or in this area, get in touch with them. But yeah, I think we can't, gender, we have to complicate our notion of gender. And we have to realize there's no way that we can, certainly no way that we can deal with the binary notions of gender. But then we say, okay, well then there are 4 genders. There are 2 cisgenders, men and women, and then there are trans women and trans men. But then, what about people who don't necessarily identify into a gender? So there's something you might call gender nonconforming or whatever. But, the thing is that we have to be able to use the categories we use, recognizing that they're always going to change. And we can't get upset when they no longer work the way we think they should work. To me, that's the process of acquiring knowledge. That's the process of learning, and not just in institutions like this, but learning in the streets and learning on the jobs. And yeah, abolish the box. Absolutely. And in California, it's really great to see that this is happening on this campus. In California, All of Us or None, which is an organization of all formerly incarcerated felons, former felons. It's called All of Us or None. And one of the main struggles they've undertaken over the last years has been ban the box around jobs and employment. Because the thing is that the tentacles of the prison industrial complex reach out widely into our communities. And I always like to remind myself that we never would have had George W. Bush if it hadn't been for felony disenfranchisement. Seriously. Bush never would have, Gore would have been, remember him? He would have been president if it hadn't been for that. But anyway, ban the box, abolish the box. Why do you have to ask someone who wants to attend this university if they have ever been convicted of a crime? I mean, does one moment or one act define the entire trajectory of your life? And unfortunately, for the most part, people who want to get an education and they want to get an education, which is actually, I think, the most important alternative to incarceration. So that is the best way to guarantee that they will not be in a situation where they end up back in prison again, and then they're told that they can't get an education because they've been to prison. So you see, it's ridiculous. It's absurd. So maybe, where are you? Where did you go? So do you have the petition? Do you have the petition with you? But is there like, is an online petition? Okay, what's the web address? IEC. Listen, organizers always have to be prepared. You asked the questions, so you should have come with your petitions and with your literature. Okay, let's wait until we can find the... Okay. Almost there? Okay. Oh, somebody else has a computer and it's up on that. What? Kimmel, 246 Green Street, every other Tuesday. Every other Saturday, sorry. Okay, now tell me where people can sign that petition, because everybody in here can sign the petition. I tell you what, let's take some more questions and you come back. When you find it, let us know. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. No, you're absolutely right. And I think this is the right time to do that work. And it has been difficult to do Palestine solidarity work over the years. I mean, I can tell you that I first became involved in doing Palestine solidarity work when I was an undergraduate. And it was at Brandeis University. And there was a very vibrant movement among students there. And Brandeis, of course, was founded in the same year as the State of Israel. If you know anything about the connections between Brandeis and Israel, you would probably say, oh, it must have been really difficult to do work on that campus, but it wasn't. Oftentimes, I mean, you're right, Zionism, there's a really powerful Zionist lobby in New York and at NYU. But that shouldn't frighten people away. It shouldn't. And if I think back to the era of segregation in the South, if people had been so afraid of the consequences of standing up against segregation, against racist segregation, where would we be today? I mean, there were people then who could not imagine the dismantling of that whole system. And interestingly, increasing numbers of Jews who live in Israel are standing up against the occupation. This is the information you don't get. And it is right and it is ethical to say that people deserve to be treated with dignity. They don't deserve to be segregated in the way that Israel segregates Palestinians and prevents people from driving on highways that run through occupied Palestine from settlement to settlement. I mean, it is horrendous. When I visited Palestine, as long as I've been doing Palestine solidarity work, I thought I knew. But when I got there and saw what Palestinians experience every day, it was such a shock to me. And I asked myself, why didn't I know this in the way I should have known it before? And I always point out that that Palestinians, young Palestinian activists, have expressed solidarity with black activists in the U.S. and have actually adopted some of the same strategies and identified with the history. They are our sisters and brothers. And if we are opposed to racism, if we are opposed to anti-Semitism, we also have to stand up against the occupation of Palestine. And there is a boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And there are a number of targeted boycotts. G4S is one of them. I was talking about the security company that has its presence in Africa and Israel, and as a matter of fact, was responsible for the death of a young Angolan man named Jimmy Mubanga, who was being deported from London to from Britain to Angola and was killed by G4S guards. I mean, I could go on and on talking about that corporation. But there's also Veolia. I don't know whether anyone knows Super Shuttle. Veolia owns Super Shuttle. Veolia actually controls a lot of the transportation in New York and all over the country. It's a huge multinational corporation. I mean, I used to use Super Shuttle to get to the airport from my house. I do a lot of traveling, so, and I said no. I love hummus. I don't eat Sabra hummus anymore. I mean, these are some of the products that are being targeted. So I think what's important is to talk to people. And some people are going to react irrationally. And that's their problem. You know? And, you know, so I always decide, am I going to engage with someone? Sometimes I can have a conversation. If I can have a conversation, it's not about my wanting to have my way. It's just about having a conversation. I'm willing to listen to the other person, even though I may totally disagree with that person. And that person has to be willing to listen to me as well. And if that can happen, I say, right on. But sometimes that can't happen. And so I just say, okay, I see that your whole purpose here is just to express rage and anger. And so you're going to have to find someone else to do that with. So, goodbye. So don't get drawn into something that is totally non-productive. And good luck. And the most important thing is to find people to stand with you. So is there like a Students for Justice in Palestine organization here at NYU? There is? Are you in it? Is there anybody in the house who is in it? Is there somebody who wants to be involved? Okay, somebody who wants to be involved, take all of the names and email addresses of people who want to be involved, and then we'll figure out who's doing the Justice for Palestine work on this campus. There will be a sign-up sheet in the back. What's your name? West. West will have a sign-up sheet in the back. Oh, wonderful. A panel, what time? When? Here in this space? And Robin Kelly's going to be here as well? He's coming back? Oh, okay. Good. Wow, that sounds like a great panel. So, did everybody hear? Oh, tell me, let me see the flyer. Oh, great. Against Israeli Apartheid. Monday, March 10th, 2014, 7 to 9, NYU Global Center for Academic and Spiritual Life, which is room 95. It's at 238 Thompson Street. Is that here? Nearby? Is this Thompson? Thompson Street is, oh, okay, it's the building next door. Okay. All right, let's do one more round. Okay. One more round. I'm sorry. Okay, does everybody, well, you know what? I tell you what, why doesn't everybody succinctly pose the question? And then I'll see what I can do about at least gesturing toward all of them.